Hello YouTube, Robin Hood Bricks here, and today I thought we'd get on with the Daily Bugle build because I really want to see this thing finished. Alright, well so far we have done the sign on top of the building and the top 3 floors. We've still got the bottom floor to do to reduce its depth and put it on a 16 by 32 base plate. But with all the parts we liberated, we managed to make an additional floor last time with its opening lift, as demonstrated currently by Spider-Man, who will be leaving the scene, and a bright orange floor, which you did actually quite like, so I'm glad to hear that because I still haven't got any more tiles. And we've obviously changed all of the ladders up the side for the fire escape to make them double spaced and have one on the roof floor and so on, and I think it is looking a lot better. But one thing I didn't show you last time was this floor in the building, because I think it makes a really big difference to the whole outlook. So if you kind of memorize what it looks like now. And the other thing is I've made a final decision on the TV screens at the front with all of their Spider-Man Marvel-y type themed sort of scenes and all of that pink skin. Yep, I'm getting rid of it all. That is kind of a final decision. I've flip-flopped each way. But I think that the building looks a lot cleaner without it, and with the additional floor I think it looks absolutely fantastic, and I was encouraged to do so as well by Mrs. Hood, who usually has quite a good taste on this sort of thing. So I'm going to pop that orange new floor in the middle temporarily just to show you everything we've done to date. Well, how's about that? I think that is a much better proportioned skyscraper building with the 5 floors on. I think it just makes the absolute world of difference. So yeah, that is an absolute lock. That is staying at 5 floors. And I'm also thinking that that is a greatly improved scene without the sign. I will obviously have to replace those modified bricks with some glass panels. So excellent. That is our progress so far. So now on to the next thing. I have liberated this floor from the town hall, which has got all of the Ultra Agents baddies in it, or at least the majority of them that I originally had, and indeed the tremor tank that's going to be smashing through that bottom floor in due course. But before that, I think I have to do 2 things. Firstly, introduce the first of my Ultra Agents to the stand, which the Green Goblin would have been on, because I think that's where we should be putting our pride of place Ultra Agent baddie or Ultra Villain. And secondly, I think we need to do something on the inside of this floor. And I gave you some suggestions that I was considering last time, and they both got a resounding thumbs up. So that's what I'm going to start with today. Probably starting with the contents of this floor, which was a printing press. Well, it certainly makes it a lot easier to know what to do next week when I receive such a unanimous response to my suggestions of having Ultra Agents baddies flying around the building in place of all the Marvel baddies, and doing a printing press on the newly vacant floor. But that did create a bit of a problem for me in designing, in that then I had to, well, go ahead and design a printing press, and I haven't got much to work from, haven't got any real world experience of even seeing these things other than in films and TV and so on. So it was a bit of a challenge really, and I'm not really known for my sort of detailed mini builds using intricate little parts all very cleverly. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, but I did actually rise to it quite well, I think. Once I got into it, it really started to flow quite well, and I've got to say I really enjoyed the build, so I'm quite glad that I had that as my challenge to do this week. So what am I aiming for? Well, I don't want anything too modern, basically. The modern printing devices that I've sort of Googled for inspiration look very sort of boring indeed, and that the fact that they've got the sort of stream of paper going into a few big digital computer boxes and then coming out with all the printing on. So I mean, it's kind of a bit nothing much to show there. But also I don't want to go back too far into the history, because then the printing machines had so many rollers and so on that you could barely work out what on earth was going on. Far too many workings and gears and so on. So I think I'm going to go for that sort of middle era that's probably the 70s or 80s or something like that, where you've got streams of sort of visible paper going around rollers and getting straightened out and changed in direction and going into the odd bit of machines. with a big reel of unused paper at the front and kind of printed paper coming out the other end. And I think that will be much more of an industrial sort of looking scene rather than a sort of modern high-tech scene that you might see in a real life printers. And I'm sure what I'm going to be doing is not very accurate for real life at all. But as I say, I just want to have that impression of raw paper going in at one end and newspaper printed coming out of the other. So after spending so long kind of fiddling with this build and getting it kind of perfect, I feel that maybe we aren't making as much progress on this building as we could be doing. But at least I'm very happy with the product that I'm going to be building for you today. And it's a bit of a shame that we're going to lose such an intricate build on the inside of one of these floors behind these window panels, because you really won't be able to see it very well at all. But such is the case with, well, virtually every building in my city, really. This may as well not be any exception to that. So what I thought I would do is look through the pieces that I have in my collection for inspiration, and a few leapt out. Some were very sort of mechanical pieces that I've got absolutely no idea how you'd use them in real life anyway, and I thought I'd try and incorporate because that's kind of a really interesting shape. I had one of these sort of spring pieces left from when I did my train buffers, and they're really fun as well, so I thought I'd try and include that. And then these sort of half-width brackets, I don't know what you'd call it really, is really interesting as well, with lots of different holes and so on. And then these kind of panel-y pieces, kind of a windscreen really, and this is part 6070, which is titled Windscreen 5x2 by 1 2/3, very catchy title. I thought this would be really useful as kind of a stream of that paper coming out of a roll and going into a machine, because it's kind of got that tilt of an angle where it might be sort of running over a roller or something like that to change its direction. And I just thought it was a really good shape. And the fact that I've got two of them means I can have paper sort of coming off a roll, change a direction here, change a direction again and again, or maybe have them going off or something like that. So I thought that was really good. Now these come in quite a few sets. I had them because I managed to get as part of a bulk buy. They were off a boat 7726 Coast Guard truck with speedboat, but they're even on that sailboat that we looked at recently from the City Line as well. They've been in a few sets, but yeah, just their shape really encouraged me to use them. Now, as a result, I guess we're making a newspaper that's that width, because sometimes in these things they have really, really large rolls and they sort of get chopped up later. But the newspapers that we're going to be producing are, well, 2x2 wide, of course. So let's just pull one off here. Ugh. So they're going to be kind of like that. So it makes sense in a way that we're going to have strips of paper that are the same dimensions. So the first thing I thought I'd do is make a roll of paper that this was coming off. And I've done that using a 2x2 round brick, a 2x2 round plate, and one of these 2x2 round tiles with a knobble on. And that's just because all of that together is exactly the same width as this stream of paper that'll be coming off it. And that kind of started off my build. You think about the roller being positioned like that and the paper kind of being pulled off the bottom of it into a set of rollers and devices and machines and so on. So that is the beginning of my printing press. And I thought, because it was so narrow and because the space we've got to work on is actually quite small in there, I thought, well, I couldn't really have an incredibly long machine that was about this long going through all the different steps. I'm going to have one that's quite short, probably only up to about there. So I thought I'd probably have a dual machine. So we've got two rolls being printed at the same time for speed. So we can have two rollers unloading paper onto the spools like that. And they'll both be being printed at the same time. Good idea, huh? And then I thought this bracket really looked like it might be one that would hold a spool like that on the end, and then maybe this could be used to support the reel of paper that was coming off it. And you can see that that Technic hole there almost looks perfectly aligned with the underside of this piece of paper that's coming off. So I thought maybe I could put a reel under there and have it being supported from underneath, and then I could have the two things side by side so they're really running together. So we'll probably have a build that's kind of 1 2, a gap in the middle 3, 4 5 wide, or 7 if you include all of the stuff on the outside. So that's how I started. Now, as this build is probably one of the most fiddly and complicated ones I've made on the channel, you'll have to bear with me if I start catapulting small pieces across the desk, because it really is quite difficult. And indeed, if you want to build the same device, then you'll have to pay attention pretty carefully, I think, because it is very fiddly with lots of very small parts in it. So I need a base just to attach everything onto, and this will just be for one side of our double printer. And onto the front, I'm going to add this setup, which is a 1x2 Technic brick with an X on it, 1x2 Technic brick with two holes, and a 1x1 one with one hole on it. And that can go like that. And the easiest one to do is the 1x1 hole, which I'm just going to put a green sort of go light on to turn the machine on. And then on the back, I'm going to have a 2x2x3 brick with a bit more of a base to act as the back part of the support. And that will mean that my paper kind of stream, or the windscreen piece, can fit perfectly in between the front support and the back support. So that's it coming off the reel. And that's where I can attach my reel that we did earlier, just kind of like that. So the paper is being pulled off the bottom of this great big reel of paper. And you can see that axle hole is aligned with the underside of our white windscreen piece. So I'm just going to sort of push that in there, and that axle can act as the sort of turning point of that stream of paper. So that's looking pretty good, and already it's looking quite industrial. This will get held in position in due course. And then the next interesting part is this one, this kind of spring-loaded piece. And I'm not using it for its capability here. It's just because it's a really interesting shape. And I thought I'd have something interesting kind of in this bit between this machine and the next one, kind of just as a bit of a spacer. So what I'm going to do is attach it to the bottom hole here with an axle that join the two sides together, two machines together in due course. Oh, and that's stiff as anything. And then the bottom one I can, or the top one rather, I can attach to a similar brick at the top. So I'll put that through there. Yeah, things are going to fall off this throughout and go like that. So you can see that's going to add some really sort of interesting kind of motiony looking gubbins into the middle of the two machines. And I think I'll do a similar thing with this piece here. So if I put that reel back on, that's just fallen off because it's not attached. In fact, let's attach that now with just one of these washer pieces like that. Yeah, I could have this as a bit of texture in between the two reels, because if this reel is going to go sort of back to back here, then it would be good to have something kind of in the middle. So I can skewer that in with another axle piece. So I'm just going to use a 4-long axle there, put that on there and do that. There we go. And then just so this kind of bit isn't flapping around, I think I'll probably put it in one of these connector tube type pieces and have it like it's a pipe being fed from underneath. So that's looking pretty good already. So what I'm going to do next is just replicate this. So we've got the same equipment on the other side. And that I can do by, well, basically adding several pieces at once. And it probably won't work, but let's try it. So that's that. So that worked quite well. That is that. What have I forgotten? Forgotten this. I might have to lift this off. Something's fallen off. There we go. What fell off? That. That's going to fall off a lot. So I'll put that to one side. Then what else do I need? I need the reel connected to another one of those brackets and the other half of this axle. And what I really want to do is to suspend this in the middle of the two. So I'm just going to pull this one out a little bit. And this is going to be, there's another bit that's gone flying, fiddly as anything. So I'm going to push that in there and push this axle to try and catch it. And I have done, that's good. And then this can catch it from the other side whilst being on there and through there. So you know when I said this was fiddly? It is crazy fiddly. Because I'm trying to put that through, and that through, all different axles without destroying what is a very fragile little build. And it might be because that is turned wrong. There we go. There we go. Almost through, not in that one. Come on. Play the game. It's just not working. Ah, there we go. We've got it. And that comes undone, but it's done again. And I can put that in there. That's just going to rest in there to give it a bit more detail. And there is what probably needs tightening up in a certain place. There we go. Is my double printing press. And I think you can see already this is looking really good. We've obviously got 2 reels of paper, and we can have a couple of spares as well. If I put that back in there, we've got a nice round bit of texture kind of in between those 2 on and off switches. We've kind of got the odd shaped brackets holding everything together, and we've got this lovely supporting kind of reel or spool kind of underneath the bend in the paper before it goes into the printing machine. So I think the first stage of making our own newspapers is pretty good. So even at this stage of the build, I was very happy with my printing press. I thought it looked absolutely fantastic. But I just kept on going because I was really bitten by the bug at that point and really wanted to make it even more ornate and complicated. And what it occurred to me, first of all, was that usually where you've got kind of a pivot point like this, where the paper is being bent, you've kind of got a roller not just underneath it, but maybe a smaller roller on top of it, just to make sure that it doesn't go awry. And that's why I had to take everything apart when I was building it the first time to put in this little centerpiece here. So we've got a nice holding place for a kind of thinner pivot point. And that pivot point I thought I would do using bar pieces, and this really interesting Technic piece, which I have no idea what it's for, but it looks appropriate as kind of another arm. And I thought that this could hinge off our existing kind of point here and go through to that central one there and kind of act as I say, a kind of top roller. And I think you'll agree that makes it look even more interesting and kind of breaks up that expanse of white. And then that whole setup I can pin in with more of those washers and do the same on the other side. And it really adds more to the sort of industrial look as well, because we've now got, try and get that even on both sides, because now we've got the kind of arms from this coming down and filling this space as well that we didn't have anything interesting in at all. So let's just push that through a little bit more. I'm conscious that if I push anything too hard, it might well smash the whole thing into smithereens. But there we go. There is a nice little roller on top of the big roller. And it just shows that playing around with odd shaped pieces in your collection can have some really good outcomes. I think that looks really, really fantastic. So not done yet. I thought I'd use a few of these pieces, the kind of round tile with the knobble on, just to make things even more intricate. So I thought I'd put one on each end of this spool, just to make that look a bit more complete and a bit more solid. And then because this arm looks a bit sort of flimsy and rickety, I thought I'd put one also into the X on each end of those. And it looks like they've got some sort of wheel or handle. And I thought I'd make it slightly asymmetrical at this point by adding kind of I'm thinking of it as a handbrake kind of onto that one to bring it to an emergency stop, or maybe reposition the arm or something like that. And then one of these small steering wheel type pieces to go on the end of that, so it could be fine-tuned there as well. Hey, look at that. That is definitely a newspaper press. So I figure that this whole area here will be the bit that adds the print. And then out of the sort of far side, we can have fully printed front pages, because that's what we'll have to have in succession, because we don't have any sort of in the middle pages on tiles unless I make my own. So basically we need to close off this area. And the most important thing I think is that we can't see the side of this white piece here, because we want it to kind of vanish into a machine, not be showing side on. So with that in mind, I thought the best way to conceal it was just with one of these ladder pieces in dark grey, because that would conceal that side of the white, but also add a bit of texture to this plain area here, so it's look even more busy now. And then I'm going to add some grey plates, but that is important for later. So that was a late addition in the original, just to bring that level with that. And then we can add this before I do the same on the other side, and that's just a 3 long axle, just to give a bit more interest to that middle section. And then we can do the same on the other side. Ooh, you see how fragile it is? What's fallen off? That. I already said that was going to fall off a lot, and I've proven myself right. So there we go. So there is our next stage of the build. And wow, I just think that looks absolutely epic. So yeah, that goes in there, and whoop, and it'll be attached to the floor. So yeah, there we go with our spare reels and our newspaper. Now the newspapers that we're going to be printing today are these ones, and they're from the Daily Bugle set, and they say no crime, no thanks to Spider Menace. And the reason why I've chosen this one is because it's quite bold, so we'll be able to see it from a distance, but also, more importantly, because I've got 4 of them, because when these printers work, they'll probably print the same page many times to be guillotined up and make into a newspaper, rather than printing sort of page 1, then page 2, then page 3, and then starting again at the beginning sort of thing. So my first thought was to have this all sort of coming out horizontally as the next stage, having just been printed at the same level as the paper went in. But I soon realised that wasn't going to work just because of where we're going to be putting this. Now, on one hand, I could have the whole sort of setup going left to right, but I figured that's not going to work very well because we're going to need to have bits that chop up the newspaper, sort of stacks of papers and all the rest of it. So I thought I'd do my sort of normal facade technique and kind of have it going that way, which means we really haven't got much space left to do the whole printed newspaper part. So it makes it a bit easy in that all we have to do is the sort of beginning of the next part, but still it needs to be fitting into quite a tight space. So I figured that basically it might be better to have it as another angle change, because newspapers in those pictures always have, you know, the angle that the newspaper is being printed at going at different angles. So I thought I'd have it coming up at kind of a diagonal angle like this. And that would also mean you're able to see it a lot better. So I thought that was a good idea. So I'm going to make a little setup here with one of these sort of boat tiles or shoe pieces like that. And then I can attach a couple of these newspapers on. And that's where I'm going to use this clip. So it'll clip like that and then start coming up at an angle like that. So I can do that on the other side as well. So we've got one on each. Now, at the moment, we've got, well, a physical gap that we want to hide that sort of prevents us from thinking that this is sort of coming in an unbroken stream of paper from here, because it hasn't been chopped at all yet. So we do have to cross that bridge. So what I'm going to do is start adding a few plates and towels here, just to add a bit more detail. So we've got those ones sort of blocking off our view from the front. And then the only other way I can block this from the side angle and show this at all is by adding on one of these bracket pieces. And you see that kind of muddies the join entirely, so you really can't see it. And if I'm going to use that, I may as well add some printed tiles to it. So we've got some gauges and some buttons. So that works quite well. And I can do the same thing on the other side. And then probably not true to life, but I thought it might be good if there's kind of a warning signal for when the machine is on or starting up or something like that that might flash. And I'll put that on either side. And that orange will definitely go with the orange of the floor tiles. So there is the next sort of section of the machine. And I think it does look unbroken again now with the reel of paper unprinted and then popping out printed. And we can change this angle to sort of fit it in our scene as much as is required. Yes, that's looking good. So I want to tie these together so they aren't flapping around independently. And for that, I've got another axle piece. And I'm just going to thread that through the back because I've used these sort of ones that have got it built in, this kind of underside thing. And I'm just going to pass that through a spacer piece as well, just so it looks a bit more finished. Then I can add this onto the other side. And then we've kind of got 2 more sort of holding pieces and it moves together. And I think that sort of ties in with all of this sort of gubbins down here. So yeah, looking good. Now we can only see a little bit of newspaper, so I don't want to, with the next section, cover up, say, that much, because you'll barely be able to tell. I want to cover up as little as possible. But if I have the next bit sort of disappearing that high, it kind of look like it, well, doesn't disappear in my mind. So what I really wanted to do was kind of have the next section kind of overlapping one of these newspapers. So it really looked like it was vanishing into another device that maybe, I don't know, dried the ink or something. I've no idea. And the only way I could really think of getting this sort of half space, half stud sort of separation was using one of these very useful 1x2 rounded plates, because they've got the open stud, which will enable these bracket pieces to kind of go on the half stud like that. And I think that that, with a pair of those, will mean we can make the whole thing kind of vanish into the next part of the machine. And that's where my wall is going to be of the Lego room, and the end of the facade. And if I do the same on the other one, then essentially that is the end of our machine. So there we go. We have got paper reels with an on-off switch, all of this sort of handbrake and fine adjustment to all of the reels that are going to be making sure it gets into the printer with its controls perfectly straight. And then out the other side are going to be popping all of our newly printed front pages that will then be going into whatever this machine is that's the next part of the process. But I think that is a really nice little build, and you can probably see now why it took most of my building time this week to get this done for today's video. But I think it's well worth it. What do you think? Right, so then to placement. The first thing to note is that I managed to liberate a lot more tiles by taking apart, yet again, my Dodgems ride and replacing the sort of hidden tiles that were orange in that whole setup with different colours that I didn't need. And that's just given me enough to fill in the floor. I don't need Spider-Man anymore because we're de-marveling the whole thing. And I thought I'd put on these spare paper reels onto kind of jumper plates and 1x1 plates in the room, just to make the whole thing look like it was a bit more in use. Yeah, maybe something like that. And then because we've taken Spider-Man out, we really need to replace him. So I guess we'll put in the first of our Ultra agents. And I just want one on foot, so one without a great big vehicle. So we haven't got much choice, but I think I'm going to go for Retox, who's taken his chair with him. Oh, let's leave that behind. And he'll need a gun that's blazing, no doubt, because he'll be attacking the whole newspaper. We haven't quite established what the motive for that is, but here's that guy in his nice brown bowler hat and his sort of toxic grenades, they look like, that he's got there. So I thought I'd give him a standard sort of gun. But because I want that to be firing, I'm going to be adding on one of these 1x1 round studs with the hole in it onto one of the barrels. And then I can use that to kind of connect it to one of these action pieces. And that can be the sort of flare coming out of the barrel of the gun. So that's him sort of going full auto on the room. And unfortunately, it's kind of orange on orange, but I suppose I could always move the open lift to a different floor in future if it doesn't really work here. But now is the hard thing, to get my ginormous hand into this very small space. So let's see if I can get his foot on that jumper plate. Oh, and I've done it. Yep, I've only gone and done it. So there we are. So there's him coming into the room. Maybe you can see it a bit better there. With his gun firing at the windows. So there we go. And then we can put in our wonderful machine. So I want that facing that way, obviously, and I've done all these little jumper plates so I can kind of connect it to the floor. Now this still is quite fragile, this machine, so I can't push down too hard in certain places, otherwise I'll break it. So if this doesn't go well, you may hear some beeping of the obscenities being bleeped out, but I think I have done it. And then just to continue this sort of illusion that this machine is going off into the background, there's kind of a gap here. And I thought, since I had so many of these pieces liberated from the modification of this set, I'll just use them in a couple of pairs kind of attached to the underside of this kind of beam, kind of like that. If I can do it. No, I've broken my device. There we go. That'll make it a bit easier to get in. If I do that, yeah, you have to be patient with me today because it's a bit harder doing all these very fiddly things, especially live on camera. Maybe I should have done it like this in the first place. There we go. That should continue on the illusion that this machine continues on into the background. So if I can put those pieces back on when it's in position, and then we'll take a look from the front. So that's it from the back, no gap really to speak of, and there it is from the front. So there is our wonderful printing press, and this is why it's kind of depressing when you've done such an intricate build like this, and then you can kind of, yeah, I can kind of just see it through the windows, but it's not exactly 100% visible. I think it looks good from that window. Yeah, that looks really good actually, but you'll see that there's sort of the unbroken connection with that ceiling now. So yeah, that's looking really good. So there is my wonderful printing room, as infiltrated by one of the ultra villains who's just got off the lift and is already firing full auto into the room. But I think that is looking pretty good if you ask me. Now I think I just got time to probably add one more very impressive ultra villain to the position which we took the Green Goblin off. So let's do that next. Right, so we've added an ultra villain to one floor, our fully customized floor, but now to add one to another floor. And as soon as I first saw this exploding front vista, I thought of one person, and that's the one I'm going to use to replace the Green Goblin on this rather wobbly stick, which is a lot less wobbly now we've fixed all the structure of this front panel. Yeah, and that person was Antimatter, the leader of all of the Ultra Agents, who was sat in pride of place on his kind of throne next to the globe for world domination at the boardroom table. But now the plans have been finished, he can be let loose on the world. So there he is in his wonderful kind of purple with this hood with the eye slits in and this lovely logo on the front and all the rest of it, and his wonderful staff with this kind of antimatter symbol and the microchip on the back, and he's looking brilliant. I think he's one of the best minifigures that Lego have ever made. And what makes him even better is his mode of transport, which is this kind of flying saucer type setup here. And this isn't very easy to get your hands on unless you had bought the set 70170, Ultracopter versus Antimatter. If you didn't, like me, I didn't, you have to get all the very difficult to get pieces, like this dish in the kind of dark gunmetal metallic colour, and 3 of these purple gems. And they're really interesting because they kind of spin round as the thing is flying, and I think that's kind of the propulsion mechanism, and that gets it flying really fast in the air. And then we've got 2 flick-fire missiles, one on each side, and the man himself kind of just stands in pride of place on top of it, looking rather menacing. And in that respect, he's very much like the Green Goblin, and you can already tell he's going to look awesome when he's sat on here. But I do need to attach him somehow, and as it's currently set up, we've just got the bottom of an axle here. We can't really attach it, well, anywhere really, so I'm going to have to do a few quick mods. So if I pull off this whole setup here and pull out this half Technic pin, which I can't grip at all, I'll poke it out with this axle. No, it's not coming. There we go. Had quite a few problems today, haven't we? I'm going to replace it with this 3 long axle, and I'm going to have to unfortunately add this bracket thing as a spacer to go in the same place, and that can go there and in there, and that is just so I've kind of got this stud on the end to attach to that, so it will be quite fragile. So I won't be able to knock him very hard without him falling off. And I don't want to do that too tight because I don't want to clamp this in position. I do want it to still be able to rotate. So that's a little bit too tight. There we go. It's a fine balance, but there we go. So then we can basically attach that stud to there, have it in position. And then when he's bursting out the building, wow, that looks cool. You can still spin this, hopefully. Yeah, it works. So that's really good. So he's flying. I think he's in danger of tipping, so I might have to secure this from going round on itself. But I think that looks really good. Now, when we did Retox in the other floor, we added a bit of dynamism with his sort of firing gun, and we've already got a bit of dynamism here, obviously, with all the fronts of the building blowing off and his explosions. But I thought we could go a bit further than that and do something with one of his flick-fire missiles. So what I thought I would do is take off one of those flick-fire missiles. I'll take off the man himself for a moment as well, and basically use one of these pieces, which come with all of these explosions, sort of energy effect pieces, to kind of act as if this thing had just been fired. So I'm going to attach these together using more of these 1x1s with a hole in. So I can add one onto the end of that, one onto the end of that, and then join the two studs together. And then that should join the two bars together like that. And it's just a bit of energy, coming out the back of the rocket. And then on the sort of place where it came from, I can push one stud into one side, one stud into the other side, and then on kind of the exhaust side of things, I'm going to add the same thing I did earlier onto Retox. So I'm just going to have that being kind of the exhaust, so to speak, getting fired backwards. And then I can attach, where did it roll to? There we are, my entire rocket setup into the front like that. And therefore it looks like he's midway through firing one of his flick-fire rockets at, well, another target. I hope it's not the hospital. That's roughly where we're going to be mounting this whole building, opposite the hospital. So that would be very cruel of him, wouldn't it? But there we go. So I can add him back on. Let's hope his cloak doesn't get too scorched by the explosion of the rocket there. I bet he's made it out of some wonderful futuristic material, so he's safe. But I think that adds even more to the scene to make it super dynamic, and we could have him kind of at an angle maybe and have him firing his rocket while still being able to spin his spinner. Oh, I hope that doesn't happen too often. Right, well, we can't have the boss of the ultra villains flapping around, so I'm just going to put this on, which is kind of the opposite of the piece that was on there originally to stop it from rotating. I will have to get a better colour for it than the one I've got now in red, but that should prevent the whole thing from turning around when it's in position. Is that attached? I think it is. So now we can put him back on, and yeah, that stops him from flopping over, so that's good. I think it's nice that he's at a jaunty angle. He's always going to be a bit wobbly, especially when I hit that. Yeah, so I think we've made quite a good amount of progress today. Probably not as much as I'd have hoped, given that we've got quite a lot of this building still to do, and I didn't really want this to be a major series as such. But we've added the boss of the ultravillains, Antimatter, to this with a very dynamic firing missile. I think that looks absolutely fantastic. His spinner is still spinnable. We've made an absolutely 100% bespoke printing press, which is quite hard to see, but is really good. Let's have a peek through those windows. There we go, we can see that there. I think the side view was the best, wasn't it? And that'll be the view that is facing the corner of the Lego room, so that's really helpful. And then we've got Retox as well coming in there, storming in with his gun blazing as well. So yeah, really dynamic poses there. We've got an absolute load of ultra villains to add to the rest of the building, and there's two more that aren't here as well. And then next time I think we'll have to be getting on with the ground floor of this thing, which, oh no, I nearly broke the sign off there, just to be very careful, is of course the sort of double thickness one that we're going to need to do the most work on. So yeah, some progress today, but still absolutely loads to do on the building. So I do hope you enjoyed that video. It certainly took a long time, especially to do the printing press, but I would, as always, very much appreciate your feedback of things I can do better, maybe attaching antimatter or even improving my wonderful printing press, if it's possible to improve on that at all. But as always, thank you very much for watching. It is appreciated. Do remember to like, comment and subscribe for more awesome LEGO videos. And if you value this channel, there are many ways in which you can support it. Do check out the links in the description below. And next time on Robin Hood Bricks will be a brick haul. It'll be a normal brick haul, you might be glad to hear. But we do have a couple of remnant packages that came late for Brick Haul 100, so I'll be going through those as well. And then on Friday, Monday and Wednesday, Mrs. Hood is taking me away to Kent, so there won't be any videos, but then we'll be back for next Friday where, well, we'll probably be back in the fairground. So apologies for another week off. You can blame the wife, but until then, see you!